All right, Alexander, we have to talk about Biden's speech yesterday, and he finally came out of hiding. I'm certain they didn't want to bring him out, but they were forced to, given everything that's going on. And okay, definitely a scripted speech, definitely written by the script writers that he has in the White House. There's no doubt about that. I thought it was well. Let's get into it. I thought it was a disgraceful speech. He came out and he says, I stand by my decision. The buck stops here. And then he went on to blame everybody else.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then he went on to blame everybody. So he blamed the Gandhi presidency. Well, I'm sorry, but every presidency and every government in Afghanistan has been handpicked by the United States, funded by the United States, propped up by the United States, advised by the United States. He went on to blame the military, the Afghan military, 300,000 strong. That's what he was saying 4 weeks ago. It's 300,000 strong, and there's no way that they're going to get overrun by 70,000 Taliban fighters. That's what he said 4 weeks ago. It's on video. That video that he said that he made 4 weeks ago, that press conference is going to come back to haunt him for a very, very long time. But he said those fighters that the U.S. has been training for 20 years are a disgrace. He pretty much said they just gave up and they ran away like cowards. I'm paraphrasing Biden, but that was the message he wanted to get across. He tried to blame Trump. He presented this false binary decision that I just popped up in office and I just had two choices: either follow through on the May 1st deal or fight the Taliban. Well, Mr. President, you didn't do either of those. You came in and you destroyed the May 1st deal, like you've done every other policy that the Trump White House has put into place, the border wall, everything. And you didn't end up fighting the Taliban either. You picked a third option, which was worse than all of those options. And I mean, it was a false, he's gaslighting the people. That's what I saw when I heard his speech. Pure gaslighting, pure lies. He tried to present the case that I just came in there and I didn't have any other choice, and Trump put me in a difficult position. He tried to lie about nation building. We're not here to nation build. Really? Is that so? He said that I don't want the American soldiers to be here for another day, to be in Afghanistan for another day. Really? Biden has been in the government, in Congress, in the Senate for the entirety of the 20 years war. He knows exactly what was going on in Afghanistan. And then he comes in and he says, well, I couldn't stand to have U.S. troops there another day. And finally, Alexander, I hate the fact that his script writing team, his PR team, is trying to lie to the entire world and present the narrative, which is, hey, I'm the courageous president who's pulling us out of Afghanistan. Isn't that what you wanted? That's not why people are upset. Yes, people wanted the U.S. out of Afghanistan. Everybody wanted the U.S. out of Afghanistan, but people are upset not at the fact that the U.S. has left Afghanistan. They're upset at the fact as to how you went about it and the humiliation of the entire process, and the fact that there was no backup plan, there was no evacuation plan, there was no contingency planning at all. That's what people are upset about. It's not the fact that the U.S. left Afghanistan. It's the fact that there was no plan. You tore up the May 1st agreement and you had nothing. You had no backup plan. So a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of lying, and I found the entire speech to be absolutely reprehensible.
Well, can I say, first of all, most people agree with you. I mean, the response to the speech from virtually every side, including many people who are on the Democrat side, people like Axel Rod, Obama's number two, even people like him are criticizing it. But it was an absolutely awful speech. And let's first of all begin with the delivery, because you said that he was hiding. Well, that's exactly how it came across, because he comes from Camp David. He walks up to he walks up to make this speech. He comes to the lectern. The speech is obviously incredibly carefully scripted. Every word in that speech was thought through and said in advance. He speaks, as you absolutely correctly say, he blames everyone else except himself. He is the hero. He is the brave man who took the courageous decision to leave. Everyone else is to blame. The Afghan army is to blame. The Afghan government is to blame. Donald Trump is to blame. By implication, even the intelligence community and the military and previous presidents, including, by the way, even the great Obama, they're all to blame. Only Biden is the courageous, brave, noble person who took the brave, noble, courageous decision which has led to this debacle. But, it was absolutely the blame someone else speech. And then what does he do when he ends? He's got all those people there, all anxious to ask him questions. He turns round, shows his back to them, and walks straight out of the door. And then you see him going back on the helicopter to Camp David. I mean, I thought it was awful. I mean, the optics of it were dreadful. Now, let's unpack what he actually said, because he did two things. Firstly, as I said, he blamed everybody. He, as you absolutely correctly say, created a completely false binary, that he was trapped supposedly in the agreement that Donald Trump had made, which is absolutely not true. He scrapped everything else that Trump has done, and he scrapped this agreement that Trump made. That agreement was for a structured withdrawal worked out with the Taliban and with the Afghan government. And the idea was that there would be discussions, negotiations, they would set up some kind of government of national unity together, and that would provide a transition period which would allow the US to leave with the appearance of honour, with its honour intact. And then, of course, it would have been up to the Afghans to know what to do. Now, it is absolutely correct that President Ghani, as you rightly said, handpicked by the United States, as every other leader of Afghanistan has been ever since 2001, was unbelievably incompetent and unbelievably corrupt. It is also absolutely true, as Biden also said, that Ghani has refused any kind of negotiations, any kind of transitional deal with the Taliban. He effectively wrecked the negotiations. And the reason he did that was because, obviously, as we now know, he was plundering and laying his hands on everything he could. He didn't want the gravy train to stop earlier than it had to. So that was what Ghani was up to. Biden's responsibility as President of the United States, when up against someone like Ghani, was to push him aside. And when I say that, I don't mean carrying out a kind of regime change in Afghanistan. I mean coming out publicly and saying to President Ghani and to the Afghan people, the person who is obstructing a successful and effective negotiation is your own president. Unless you do something about him, the United States cannot go on. That's what his responsibility was.
Can I interrupt you for? Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Your point is incredible, fantastic. And before I forget, isn't that what he did with Yatsenyuk in that famous video where he talked about, I gave him 6 hours or I was going to get back on the plane?
Absolutely.
With the prosecutor?
Exactly. Well, of course, he did no such thing. On the contrary, he was giving to everybody the impression that all was well, that he and Ghani were talking from the same script, that the Afghan military was this well-organized, effective, powerful force. And of course, as we now know, no contingency preparations were made, no planning was done, there was no consideration at all of what to do if anything did go wrong over the next couple of weeks or months, as of course it has done. So it was an abject performance, a total abdication of responsibility, an attempt to blame other people for a catastrophe which it was his responsibility as President of the United States to prevent. Can I point out a point we have made on many previous programs? Donald Trump was criticized relentlessly right through the time when he was president, but there was no American catastrophe, foreign policy catastrophe on his watch. Certain things were done which perhaps one didn't always agree with, But overall, the show kept on the road and the United States was never humiliated. This is different. And Biden was the president who was responsible. Biden it was who tore up the deal that Trump did and failed to put anything in its place. And it was Biden who totally failed to take any step after he announced that withdrawal to ensure that it was done in an orderly and effective way. I mean, bear in mind, we even had appalling things like the US military leaving Bagram Air Base, its main center of operations, at dead of night without even the Afghan government being informed. So, I mean, things like that, which was absolutely his responsibility to ensure never happened. And it was also his responsibility to ensure that top US officials, Blinken, Austin, and all the others, went to Afghanistan, repeatedly spoke to the Afghan officials, informed everybody what the policy of the administration of the White House was in order to ensure a transition. I can remember when the Soviets pulled out in 1989 from Afghanistan, that they were doing precisely that. That the Soviet foreign minister at the time, Edward Shevardnadze, for example, was regularly going backwards and forwards between Moscow and Afghanistan to make sure that everything was done in a streamlined and effective way. And then there is one other thing I'm going to say about this speech, which is that, of course, the other thing that Biden has done and did in this speech, when he said all those things about the United States not being in the business of democracy promotion and nation building. You're kidding me. What else has the United States been doing over the last 20 years? 30 years? What was the whole neocon, neoliberal, humanitarian project of which Joe Biden, as you absolutely rightly say, was a fully played up member throughout the Obama years, voting for wars, supporting wars in places like Libya and all the rest? Of course the United States was into nation building and democracy promotion. That is central to its foreign policy. And here we have Biden, who was absolutely part of all of that world, comes along and tries to steal some of the rhetoric of his predecessor, Donald Trump, who always opposed democracy promotion and nation building and all of those sort of things. And he does that in order to cover himself in this speech. And what do you see? All of those people, the neocons, the liberal interventionists, the humanitarian interventionist lobby, they are now furious because the man they backed in that election, because they thought that he was fully up with them in their great project, is now once again entirely without conviction and without any true belief, in the most unprincipled and opportunistic way, is once again talking a kind of corrupted, decayed America First rhetoric, such as the sort that Donald Trump used, but only in order to defend himself and without conviction. If you are reading what the neocons, and I call them the neocons, all that lobby, the director of Human Rights Watch, for example, all that lobby, John Bolton, all those people, William Hague in Britain, are saying after that speech, they are furious because he uttered what for them is total heresy. So he has enraged a critical constituency that was central to his winning the election last year. So he's antagonized that constituency. He's come across as shallow and opportunistic and at a fundamental level manipulative, looking to blame other people for a catastrophe of which he has been the sole begetter, as we say in England. And at the same time, by refusing to answer questions, by turning his back on the people in that room, he also looks like he's hiding and running away. Politically and in PR terms, I thought it was a disastrous performance.
It was a freaking disaster. I'm so glad you brought up the nation building, because that was my next segue, actually. Here's a quote from his speech. "Our mission in Afghanistan was never supposed to have been nation building. It was never supposed to be creating a unified, centralized democracy. Our only vital national interest in Afghanistan remains today what it has always been: preventing a terrorist attack on American homeland. Another 20 years could not have built a nation. No amount of military force would ever deliver a stable, secure, united Afghanistan." What the F? What the hell has the United States been doing for, I'll say, 19 years? I'll give them the first year. They created the illusion that they're going after bin Laden and all that nonsense, which we also know is a lie. Fine. Well, I'll give you that. I'll give you we're chasing bin Laden and Al Qaeda and we're going to go to Afghanistan. You know, what did Bush say? We have to fight them there so we don't fight them here, right? I'll give them that. What the hell have you guys been doing for 19 years? Every single year, the United States government, every single president, with the exception of Trump, has come out and said, we're nation building. Alexander, I've got articles pulled up of the U.S.'s attempt at nation building. Their pitiful, pathetic attempt at nation building. Quote from Reuters, 2015, Afghan Capital University, unlikely host for women's study programs. A group of Afghan students gathered on the leafy campus of Kabul University this week to embark on an unlikely course, the country's first master's degree in gender and women's study. That's nation building, neoliberal style. Here's some more nation building. It was only after the fall of the radical group in 2001, the Taliban, that an agreement was signed at the Bonn Conference in Germany to entrust the drafting of a new constitution, the eighth, to the Constitutional Commission, made up of 35 members. The draft stipulated in Article 22 that Afghan citizens, men and women, had the same rights and responsibilities under the law. The proposal also aimed to guarantee the rights of women suppressed by the Taliban, often depriving them of access to basic health care and education. Nation building. And an article from CBS News, Pure Propaganda, the women of Afghanistan's parliament in March 2014. All the photos of the women that are now in the Afghan parliament because of the United States' neoliberal nation building, their ideologically centered nation building. You know UK history really, really well. The U.S., and I'm not for nation building, the U.S. has no idea how to run empire and how to nation build. The UK, they knew how to nation build. I live in a country that has suffered from UK nation building, but has also benefited from UK nation building with institutions like legal institutions, accounting institutions, infrastructure, the English language. I've seen what serious nation building is all about. This stuff was Mickey Mouse, and how dare Biden sit there and talk about we were never in it for nation building. Give me a freaking break.
Absolutely.
What a farce.
Absolutely. Now, I noticed also the dates of all those exceptionally brilliant articles, illustrative articles.
Basic search.
2014, 2015. Who was president at that time? Who was vice president at that time? What speeches, comments did we hear from these two great people, Obama and Biden, at that time? Were they saying that the United States was not in the business of nation building? Were they saying, we're just there to now that Osama is out of the way, because he was it 2011 that they caught up with him?
Yeah.
Not in Afghanistan, by the way. Did they just say? Did they say then? Well, it's time now to leave. Our mission's accomplished. We can hand it over to the Afghans. Of course not. What absolute nonsense this is. I mean, and I have to say this: if he's going to start defending himself in that way now, I mean, Biden is going to start defending himself now by saying the United States doesn't do nation building. Well, I think he owes Donald Trump, in that case, an apology, because Donald Trump was always against nation building. He was at least consistent about this. So, I mean, when you position yourself as candidate in an election against your opponent, and you say that your opponent is a isolationist, you know, all those things that they were said, and America First nationalist, you remember all those words. And when you win an election on that basis, and you get the support from the regime change community, the humanitarian interventionists, the neocons, the neoliberals, all of those people, and then you come round and you do this complete change, you suddenly turn round and say, well, actually, we're not into nation building after all. I think you need to do two things. Firstly, you need to provide the American people with an explanation of why you so radically changed your mind and changed your course, when the reality is that you have, even though you like to pretend otherwise. And the second thing is, you can perhaps say some words of apology towards your predecessor, who you were even making kind of implied criticisms of in this very same speech, where you were basically trying, as I said, in this utterly decayed and unconvincing way to steal his rhetoric. So that's all that's what I can say about this. I mean, manipulative speech, politically disastrous speech, a speech of somebody who's running away.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he sits there and he says in his speech that there's not enough time or money to have turned Afghanistan around. If that was the thinking all these years, then why the hell was the U.S. there, number one? But number two, if you're going to, you know, you look at the nation building projects that the U.S. was undertaking, these were societal, ideological experiments that they were implementing on the Afghan people. They thought they could take Western principles in the U.S. that, even for many Western nations, there's certain principles which we won't get into in this video, but I think everyone understands some of the societal ideological principles that are now being floated around in the United States that even for people living in the West are a little bit difficult to swallow. But they thought they could take all these principles and just export them to Afghanistan instead of, I don't know, maybe building roads, maybe building infrastructure, maybe building hospitals, maybe instituting legal infrastructure, business infrastructure, stuff like that. The whole thing just made me absolutely furious, the gaslighting that was going on in his speech, and the whole idea that he's trying to fool people by saying, you know what, I'm the one that got us out of Afghanistan. I did it, everybody. Look, I got us out, is also just pure gaslighting, because people are not upset about the United States getting out of Afghanistan. They're upset about the way you did it and the fact that you had a plan to get out, a laid out plan. Stick to the freaking plan. If you don't stick to the plan and you're going to come up with a new plan, then at least have some backups, have some contingencies, outline your plan. Tell the American people, what is the new plan, Mr. President? How are you going to get people out? They didn't have a plan. They didn't have a backup plan. They just came in, tore the existing plan, and they said, don't worry about it. Whatever happens, happens.
We'll just leave anyway, because, you know, we're so confident that the Afghan government and the Afghan army will hold together. And that's what they repeatedly said. That's what they repeatedly said right up to the moment when Kabul fell. So that gives you some idea of how utterly unprepared for this they were. I just going to add one other thing about this shambles, and of course, the one thing he didn't do in that speech, in any part or in any place, is actually address the problems at Kabul airport, the real problems that are happening there. He didn't explain why there weren't contingency plans ready to evacuate the embassies, why he didn't prepare to get all the American and British people and all the people who are connected to them out. He gave no explanation for this. Well, perhaps he wouldn't, but notice that he ran away from answering questions, because I'm sure that he would have known that the questions would be asked. And can I just make a further point? If you're going to negotiate with someone, and the United States was in a kind of negotiation with the Taliban, you need to be able to speak to the people you are negotiating with. You don't have to like them, and you're not compromising anything by talking to them. This idea that you somehow lose some sort of tantalizing legitimacy by sitting down on the table and talking to someone is, if I may say so, complete BS. It's nonsense. You can only strike a deal if you're prepared to sit down at a table and talk. Donald Trump did want to talk to the Taliban. He actually wanted to speak directly to the Taliban leadership. And of course, they blocked him. They prevented him doing that. The various people in the US government. Joe Biden would have opposed it. And all the time when he was vice president, senator, political leader, prominent personality in the United States, I don't remember him criticizing this adventure in Afghanistan at any time. I remember him supporting it all the way.
Yeah. That whole, we talked about this on our live stream the other day, that whole concept of I don't negotiate with dictators and I don't negotiate with bad people. You know, that's infected Western society now. And you see just, you know, everyday people in the US and in Europe, you know, just coming out with the excuse, oh, I'm not going to talk to you because you're an NAZI or you're a nationalist or you're a racist or you supported Trump. You're bad. That's not how life works. In life, in everyday life, whether it's business or whether it's just everyday living, you need to talk and you need to negotiate with people that don't share your same viewpoints. This is just, this Obama ideology has infected the freaking West and is destroying the West. And there you saw Biden once again, you know, coming out with this whole, well, you know, we're not going to negotiate with the Taliban. We're just going to tear up the script that that Trump had laid out, and we're just going to, you know, do our own thing. He left. He took no questions. Once again, it just shows the type of attitude of leadership today. Jen Psaki, the person who should probably be working every day now at the White House answering questions, is on holiday.
Absolutely.
This is an absolute S show. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I don't understand. If you're working in a company and you've got an emergency and something's gone down with a product or service and you're on holiday, you get on a plane and you get back to the office to sort things out. Once again, this is just normal stuff that everyday people in life that are watching this video have had to had to go up against. There's an emergency, maybe there's a family emergency, maybe there's a business emergency. I have to cut my vacation short and get back and deal with whatever I need to deal with. Not in today's woke world. No way. I'm on holiday, everybody. Don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
Have a good summer.
That's absolutely true. I mean, what it shows, look, we talked about it for long time ago, a vacuum of leadership at the centre. There's no sense from this administration of any kind of purposeful direction. They're not really, nobody is really in control. And this incredibly scripted speech of this president, reading it out, turning the pages, finishing, turning around and walking away back to his helicopter, well, that will remain. The impression of that will remain with people. Just as that other picture, that photo they released of the president talking to a screen in an empty room surrounded by empty chairs. There's no one who is really in charge. President isn't around. Where is the vice president? What has she had to say in all of this? Where is the US Defense Secretary? Why isn't he going to Kabul? Why isn't General Miller, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Combined Joint Chiefs of Staff, why isn't he going to the airport? Why isn't anybody, so far as we can see, talking to the Taliban even now? I've just done a program on my own channel. Blinken picks up the telephone and he talks to the Russians and the Chinese. And my clear impression from it was that he was actually asking the Chinese and the Russians for help with talking to the Taliban to facilitate the evacuation. I mean, it's at that level. And of course, who is actually in charge at Kabul airport at the moment? Who is the officer in charge? Of course, there is one. But why don't we see him? Why doesn't he speak? I mean,
I'm speechless. I'm sorry. I'm listening to you and I'm speechless. Yeah.
Think about.
These are normal things. These are normal things that all of us have had to face in our lives when emergencies have come up. What is wrong with these people? They're children.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the military that, once threw up people like, George Patton. Can you imagine him, invisible at the airport? Of course, they don't want to be seen at the airport because nobody really wants to own the mess that there is there. So, as I said, no sign of anybody getting a grip on the situation. And instead, we have the Secretary of State pleading with the Chinese and the Russians for help to get the Americans and all the others out of Kabul and to stop the Taliban interfering, even as the President of the United States also again manages to say something rude about the Chinese and the Russians in that very same speech that we were talking about. So, I mean, it's a dismal performance. And in any other country, they should be resigning. And, we can talk about the intelligence agencies and the abject mess that they've created too, giving everybody all these false information about what was actually going on in Afghanistan. But, where are they?
A separate video.
We'll do it on a separate. Exactly.
My final question to you is, don't you have the feeling, the hunch, something in your stomach that tells you Biden walked into this? I mean, Biden really walked into, he stepped on a pile of crap. Don't you have that feeling? Seeing him alone, you said, seeing him alone in the conference room, seeing him in his speech yesterday, seeing no one, not Harris, not Austin, not anybody coming out and helping him out, picking up some slack, Psaki on vacation. Don't you have that feeling that this guy really stepped on some crap, but he really walked into this? That's my hunch. Something bad is coming around for Sleepy Joe. I don't know.
Absolutely.
I just got that feeling.
Absolutely. Can I just make two observations? Firstly, you would have expected that in a time of crisis like this, the Vice President would be there alongside him. Both, in that conference room at Camp David and arguably at this conference today. And, not just the Vice President, but Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, all of those people, and they were nowhere to be seen. Presenting a united government and administration, they were nowhere to be seen. It's as if they're keeping away from this man who is nominally their boss. And the second thing, as I said, is that these comments about, the United States not doing democracy promotion and nation building and all that, which have enraged the democracy promotion neo a regime change lobby. It's enraged them. And I do wonder perhaps whether, given how infuriating they are to that lobby, which is a crucial part of the base, it did cross my mind. Has someone done that on purpose? Were those words intentionally put in the speech in order to isolate the old man even more, so that when the time comes to tell him to leave, well, it'll be a simpler thing to do because there'll be no one left to stand up for him. So maybe that's where we are. Maybe we are closer to the transition, the change, which everybody's been expecting, than we could have imagined. And I have to say, I saw a film yesterday. I'm not sure whether it actually was filmed yesterday, but I saw it yesterday, of the president walking to his helicopter, and he looked so old and so tired and so lacking in energy. And his movements to me looked so stiff that again, and he looked so isolated too, all by himself, that again, it did look to me as if we're seeing someone whose departure cannot be far away.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that during the first few weeks of Biden's presidency, I say that, presidency, you always had Kamala floating around in the background whenever he gave a speech. In a time of crisis, the Democrats always make sure, the Democrats are very good at this too. They always make sure that everyone is there. When Pelosi's going to talk about something that's very serious, she has the squad behind her. She has Schumer with her, or, AOC is right by her side. Democrats are all very good at these optics types of things. Yesterday, we saw a Biden with no one. Not Kamala floating around back there, not his team of advisors, no Blinken, no Austin, not Pelosi by his side, no one. And the media, and for the first time I actually saw MSNBC, CNN, and the media lay into Biden. Not to the extent of, say, like a Fox News, but they laid into Biden. Absolutely. We haven't seen that ever. That tells me something.
Absolutely. I was thinking exactly the same thing, by the way, that this is the first time that the media is really beginning to turn on him. And as I say, it was haunting almost to see him completely on his own. I mean, you would have thought that at a time of crisis, the cabinet, the members of the cabinet, the vice president, the defense and state, the secretary of defense and the secretary of state would at least be there in the White House with him to show both their support to him in this moment of crisis and to reassure the United States and the world that the United States government is strong and united. And there was no one there. He was left all by himself. He just gave this prepared speech. He read it out in a voice which barely modulated. That was the other thing I have to say I noticed. And then at the end of it, he just turned round. The people were calling to him, trying to get him to answer questions. He just walked out straight through the door. I mean, if I was able to feel sad for him, I think I would do. But I mean, there's so many other reasons why I don't feel sad that I'm not going to go into that. But there was something pathetic about it.
What a disgrace. All right. The Duran.locals.com. Check us out there. Take care, everybody.